Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Kant. Oh God, it's been so long that I have forgotten and messed up the what is now an iconic intro for the inform. Oh God, it's comprehensive yet informal study of Kant's critique of pure reason. Um, so yeah, it's been a while. Pat's not here. It's me, Matt, and Kirk today. Kirk has been joining us for the last few sessions, I believe 2 or so. Don't know where Pat went. He's fallen off the
A
face of
little
the
bit more
earth.
than that.
What's that?
A little bit more than 2.
3 or 4.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay. Yeah, Pat has been with us for those as well. He hasn't been here in a while. Don't know where he went. Hope he's okay. Pat, if you're watching this, we hope you're okay. Reach out if you're able to, and he will be missed. If you've been following along, which as I've been uploading these studies, by the way, thank you all for watching. We've got about a regular 20 views or so per video. So I'd imagine those are the same or similar people watching. So thank you for building this up a little more than it started. Started at 0 views like everything else does and such. And just wanted to thank you for helping it grow. And we're getting along here in it. Again, took a bit of a break. We were waiting for Pat, but he doesn't seem to be responding. So we want to keep it going because we do have a good amount of the critique left. We're still only about, a little less than halfway through, I think, at least judging just roughly by the length of the Paul Guyer Alan Wood translation, which is the translation we're using. I have the PDF up right here. I used to take pictures of it on my phone, but Pat said the PDF looked better. He was able to find a good PDF to use. When I tried to find an online PDF, I just found other crappy translations. We're using the Paul Guyer Alan Wood translation. Right now, we're in the systematic representation of all synthetic principles, which is in the transcendental logic section, specifically chapter 2, which I believe is the analytic of principles. Oh, no. Yeah. Wait, the second chapter was the deduction. Surely we're not on the deduction anymore. No, the deduction was section 2 of which? Of the transcendental analytic. Right. So we're in the transcendental logic, in the transcendental analytic, in the third section, which is the systematic representation of all synthetic principles. So before this section, we had the transcendental deduction, which we had the schematism of the pure concepts of the understanding. So before that, okay, so we had so the schematism of the pure concept of the understanding. Yes, that's it. The second book of the analytic principles. Oh God, yeah. The way this book is organized still confuses me. So this is why I miss Pat. He always had the most succinct introductions. But okay, so we're in the analytic principles. Last section was the schematism of the pure concepts of the understanding, and what that did was really elaborate the transcendental schema, which is it involved the transcendental imagination, and introduced the power of judgment, the transcendental doctrine of the power of judgment, which has a whole critique. It's the third critique, so I'll be excited to understand more of that, in however many, I'd imagine, years, at the rate we're going with this study. We'll get to it. But we went over the power of judgment, how the imagination is involved in making judgments, and judgments, objective judgments, right? So it involves connecting the pure concepts of the understanding namely the categories, of which there are 12, which was introduced a little before the deduction. The deduction explained how those apply to objects, and the transcendental schema and the imagination and judgment explain how those objective judgment, those objective connections between the categories and the objects of understanding combine. The transcendental schema, transcendental imagination went a little bit more into the specifics of how what the next stage is, of how the manifold gets unified through the imagination. And now we're in the systematic representation of all synthetic principles, which specifically talk about the principles of experience. So after the transcendental imagination has synthesized the manifold, unified the manifold, these principles are applied to experience. So it's not just like after it gets unified, right, we have a willy-nilly experience. There are rules, principles that determine how that experience will work. So that's the section we're in now. And so we are in right now section 3, the analogies of experience. We've talked about the first analogy, which is the principle of persistence of substance. We have talked about the second analogy, which is the principle of temporal sequence according to the law of causality. So we have the persistence of substance, we have the law of causality. And now, today, we are on the third analogy, the principle of simultaneity according to the law of interaction or community. So hopefully that was some helpful background. Sorry, that was a bit long of an explanation. I see we're already 7 minutes into it. So sorry if that was too long, but I just figured some context, especially since it's been a while for Kirk and I, would be helpful in sort of grounding, at least, even if I had to water it down a bit, what's going on in the critique, where we are, how things are working. So with that all being said, Kirk, unless you have any preliminary remarks, feel free to get started with the reading.
Proof. So we're in B257. Things are simultaneous, I should say. Simultaneous in empirical intuition, the perception of one can follow the perception of the other reciprocally, which in the temporal sequence of appearances, as has been shown in the case of the second principle, cannot happen. Thus I can direct my perception first to the moon and subsequently to the earth, or conversely first to the earth and then subsequently to the moon. And on this account, since the perceptions of these objects can follow each other reciprocally, I say that they exist simultaneously. Now simultaneity is the existence of the manifold at the same time, but one cannot perceive time itself and thereby drive the fact that things are positioned at the same time, that their perceptions can follow each other reciprocally. The synthesis of the imagination and apprehension would therefore only present each of these perceptions as one that is present in the subject when the other is not, and conversely, but not that the objects are simultaneous, i.e., that if the one is, then the other also is in the same time, and that this is necessary in order for the perceptions to be able to succeed each other reciprocally. Consequently, a concept of the understanding of the reciprocal sequence of determinations of these things simultaneously existing externally to each other is required in order to say that a reciprocal sequence of perceptions is grounded in the object, and thereby to represent the simultaneity as objective. Now, however, the relation of substances in which the one contains determinations, the ground of which is contained in the other, is the relation of influence, and if the latter reciprocally contains the ground of the determinations of the former, it is the relation of community or interaction. Thus, the simultaneity of substances in space cannot be cognized and experienced otherwise than under the presupposition of an interaction among them. This is therefore also the condition of the possibility of the things themselves as objects of experience.
Perfect. Thank you, Kirk. Let's break down that long paragraph. Although luckily this isn't as difficult as some other paragraphs that we have encountered, at least I think. So we start out with the definition of simultaneous, which if you've been following along with us, you know that definitions in Kant are very important because he's very quick to use his own vocabulary in ways that may not be super intuitive to the average reader. So we have a definition. Let's take note of that. Things are simultaneous if an empirical intuition, the perception of one perception could follow the other reciprocally, which in the temporal sequences of appearances has been shown in the case of the second principle cannot happen. Let me break that down. Which in the temporal sequence of appearances has been shown in the case of the second principle cannot happen. Thus I can direct my perception first to the moon and subsequently to the earth, or conversely first to the earth and subsequently to the moon. And on this account, since the perceptions of these objects... I see. So this is basically saying that two things exist at the same time, empirically. This example is really helpful. Let's say you look at the moon, and then somewhere, wherever you are on Earth, you look there, and then you can theoretically, in that same chunk, in the succession of time, which for Kant is linear, just moving forward, you could look at the Earth to the moon. Because they exist in the same place, or not in the same place, they exist in the same time in different places. And we can do that operation of observing it reciprocally. So reciprocally just seems to mean that in the temporal sequence of appearances, there exist two things in space at the same time, and so you could look at one then the other, or vice versa. Yeah, that seems to be what that's saying here. So that's what simultaneity, or things being simultaneous, and reciprocity of appearances seem to mean in this context. Okay, so with that, then we have simultaneously existence of the... but one cannot perceive time itself and thereby derive from the fact things are positioned at the same time that their perceptions can follow each other reciprocally, right? We cannot perceive time itself. Time is a pure intuition. We never experience pure intuitions immediately. They're always mediated by the understanding through concepts. I'd imagine in what follows, I know we just read it, but trying to break down, understand it, we're going to talk about how that works, how we can still judge things to exist and just apprehend things at the same time, despite not having access to just time itself. So let's see how that works. The synthesis of the imagination and apprehension. So imagination, right? That thing that binds, unifies is the best word, I think. Combines, synthesizes, unifies the manifold. In apprehension, therefore, only present each of these perceptions as one that is present in the subject when the other is not. Synthesis of the imagination, which present each of these. So this seems to be saying that the synthesis of imagination only presents each of these perceptions as one that is present in the subject when the other is not. So basically, we don't look at them at the same time. We look at one at a time, and conversely, but not that the objects are simultaneous. That if the one is then the other also is in the same time, and that this is necessarily in order for the perceptions to be able to succeed each other reciprocally. So how the imagination seems to present the perceptions, the empirical perceptions, to the subject is one at a time, not simultaneously. Consequently, a concept of the understanding of the reciprocal sequence of the determinations of these things simultaneously existing externally to each other is required in order to say that the reciprocal sequence of perceptions is grounded in the object, and thereby to represent the simultaneity as objective. Okay, let's break this part down now. So, a concept of the understanding of the reciprocal sequence of these determinations, these things, is required. So, right, in perception, we get, let's say, going back to the example, we get the moon and then the earth. But then we also understand that we could have looked at earth and the moon. How do we know that? Not just through how time works itself. We don't have access to that, as Kant has explained. It happens because we have a concept of the understanding of reciprocity. It's just something we have in the understand. It's something the understanding synthesizes, presumably after imagination, because imagination and apprehension therefore only present each of these perceptions as one, and the subject and the other is not. Firstly, not that the objects are simultaneous. So imagination, when it's unifying the manifold, can only give us one perception at a time. So it's up to the understanding has to further work to give us this concept, to give us this concept, and this is grounded in the object, and thereby to represent simultaneity. So simultaneity is objective. Kant is arguing here. This concept of the understanding. This is not just merely a subjective phenomenon. This is grounded in the because it's a concept that is being attached to the object. It's a concept. It's an a priori concept of the understanding. That's sort of his claim here. I'm not seeing an argument really yet, besides, I guess, just explaining what he thinks. So we'll see if we get more of an argument. Now, however, the relation of substances in which the one contains determinations, the ground of which is contained in the other, is the relation of influence. The relation of substances in which the one contains determinations, the ground of which is... Oh, this is just a Spinozist definition from what I understand of Spinoza. If something inheres in the other, the relation of substances in which one contains determinate. Yeah, so if something contains another, it actually I think I'm confusing this with inherence in Spinoza. Influence and inherence are similar words. Sorry, I had to think.
I don't quite understand. If you could explain.
This part.
Yeah, I don't really understand what this is getting at.
However, the relation of substances in which the one contains determinations, the ground of which is contained in the other, is the relation of influence. Okay, so he's giving a definition for the relation, right? A relation between two things, two substances here, in which one contains determinations, the ground of which is contained in the other. So let's say we have like a substance with a determination, and this is where Pat would be helpful because he would be able to come up with a good example for sure. I can't remember exactly. Let me look back and see if I can, in my physical copy, and see if I can find
What does it
where
mean
he
for
talks about
a substance
substance.
to be contained in like something else? I don't really understand what that
Well,
means.
okay,
But
so that part I can explain. I was trying to think of like an example of like a substance, something like, because I know it's not like the Spinozist, like, you know, God, nature, but for Kant. But let's just say okay, Pat I think used the wax example. So let's say like we have like right, candle wax, relation of substances one contains um and you sorry, I'm trying to like come up with an example in my head. Pat was also better at doing this faster. Okay, so let's just say we have like candle wax, right? And I use that because Descartes used it. It's easy. A candle, right, is malleable because it melts. We see this all the time. If you've ever had a candle and you've seen it, like, the wax like turn into liquid, that's still the candle, right? Because there's like a substance. That's the rationalist argument, and Kant, I believe, is just using that. That's why I was looking for a definition of substance. I want to make sure that's the right one. But Pat used that before in examples, and I think he's working in the Cartesian rationalist tradition in terms of how he's using substance. So we have, right, let's say like, candle wax and then something else easily malleable that candle wax would interact with. Or the what it would be the ground of
like, for example, like, what else?
I don't know, I can't really come up with an example, but like substance in which one concerns the determination of the ground of which is contained in the other. So it's basically just saying that some substances, if a substance is influenced by another, it means that like the ground of, and what the ground of the substance mean is like the like possibility for its existence.
Okay.
I
So
can't think of
the
like a good
ground is
example
like,
in real life, but what? Sorry.
you said the ground of something is what makes it possible.
Yeah.
Well, that would be. I mean, if you're a religious person, that would be God, to my understanding. And Kant is a Christian.
Um,
My
that's
misunderstanding.
really, it's a really weird example to use because of the way Kant conceives of God. That's something Pat and I have talked a little bit on the study before. But I mean, yeah, in like a pre-critical, especially scholastic like setting, yeah, that would work. Like God is yeah, we would all be influenced by God in that sense. That's a good like scholastic example. I was trying to come up with one that we could use. Like,
Would Kant reject that example?
what's that?
Would Kant reject that example? And if so, why
Yeah,
would Kant?
because well, to be honest, I don't even know. I need to learn more about what Kant thinks of God specifically. It's one of the reasons why I started the study, is because God, the existence of God, as it had been demonstrated up to this point, uh, gets lost in an antinomy of reason, which we'll get to like later on in the critique. In
I
this critique.
see. Yeah. I
So
mean, yeah, but it just seems like basically what the way you explained this sentence to me, it says you said that like when a substance influences another substance, what does that mean again?
it means that so when a substance influences another substance, it means that the first substance contains the ground of the latter, of the second
Okay, so
substance.
it means they contain the same ground.
No, it means that one is the ground of the other. One contains the ground of the other.
I understand. So like for example, with your candle wax example, would it
Mm.
be fair to say so it's not that they have the same ground, it's that one contains the same ground. So what you're saying is like let's say a candle wax is melted or a candle wax dissolves because of wind. The wind contains the ground of the candle wax, or is
No.
that like
No. The substance would be like candle. Like we know it's the candle has a substance that we know it's the same. It's about persistence over time. We talked about it last time, I think, in the yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
I mean,
sorry.
again, it's not even just Kant. It goes back to Descartes. It's about like the same thing persisting over time, like despite like changes to itself. It's still the same thing. It has the same essence. It has the same substance. That's what I understand it to mean here.
So
So
what I'm saying, so basically, if one substance like a candle
okay, let's
is
say like people can be substances. I don't know. I'm not familiar enough with this tradition to like say that, but like just for the sake of the argument and for the sake of painting this picture, let's say people can be substances. The people would okay. So the substance of like let's say there's a candle maker. The substance of the candle the substance that is the candle is influenced by the candle maker because the candle maker contains the ground for like the existence of the candle. Does that make sense?
okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So it's like mereology, basically. Is that what it sounds like?
Yeah, that's how I would um think of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So then moving on, if the latter reciprocally contains the ground of determinations of the former, it is the relation of community or interaction. So when something reciprocally contains the ground of determinations of the former, is a relation of community or interaction. So I guess when the littler thing, or if the second substance contains the ground, hmm, I guess it's just, okay. I'm guessing this is just saying that he's wording this really strangely. I'm just looking at like this paragraph as a whole, or not paragraph, this excerpt as a whole. Um, this Microsoft thing is really annoying. There we go. I
But
guess
it's
he's just
just
saying they're equal because if they both contains the ground for each other, and given that this whole like section right now is about simultaneity, then I'm just guessing this. He's basically just really complicated way saying like there's an interaction when they like cause when they cause each the ground of I'm wondering if ground has like a causal ring to it. That's what I've always understood ground to mean, but I don't know. But we are almost half an hour in, so I'm going to move on and see if I can make sense of it with the later text. I don't want to get too hung up on that one thing in the interest
do
of
you like to read or
time. Yeah, I'll finish explaining this paragraph, analyzing it to the best of my ability, and then I'll read the next probably two paragraphs because they're shorter than your long one, and then we'll go from there. And I'd imagine probably this session will go up to here, and then we can probably call it for this session. Okay, so thus the simultaneity of substances in space cannot be cognized in experience otherwise than under the presupposition of interaction among them. This is therefore also the condition of the possibility of the things themselves as objects of experience. Okay, this also confuses the hell out of me because he says the possibility of things themselves as possible experience, and his whole thing has been about this whole time since the very beginning of the critique has been about like, hey guys, I'm operating on the assumption that we do not experience things in themselves. And there's the lack of in here, so I'm just wondering if he means things themselves in like as object. I'm wondering if he just means that in the common sense, like, oh yes, this thing, this thing itself, like, oh god, I don't know. I don't know what that means, and I don't know if there's a way for me to tell what that means. Because then we would be getting into grounding of the thing in itself, and like that just seems like not what he's aiming at here. So I don't know why he's adding in these sentences, but basically, what I can. So it made pretty good sense to me up until like this excerpt here, but from what I can gather, it just means that there is an interaction among substances in experience. Interaction being they contain the grounds for each other. Multiple substances. Hence, they can exist at the same time. Or in Kant's language, they can be simultaneous. And I'm guessing that's because of the concept of the understanding of reciprocal sequence. So that's my best guess. I don't know, Kirk, do you have anything to add before I move on?
No.
Okay, I'm gonna move on. That was a little confusing.
Bruh.
I wish Pat were here. This would he would be helpful in something like this, I'd imagine. Or he'd just be as confused. I can't say that for sure. It's hard to tell. But anyway, moving on, because we have, the personnel we have. Things are simultaneous insofar as they exist at one and the same time. Okay, Kant being repetitive, no surprise to us at this point in this study of the critique. But how does one cognize that they exist at one and the same time? I thought it was because of the concept of the understanding of reciprocal sequence. Oh, I guess that's technically a little different. Although it kind of assumes they exist at the same time. Okay, so maybe he's asking just how does that work? Okay, how does one cognize they exist at the same time? Let's see what he says. If the order in the synthesis of apprehension of this manifold is indifferent, i.e., it can proceed from A through B, C to D to E, but also conversely from E to A, right? That makes sense if everything is reciprocal, right? We could theoretically just synthesize the apprehension of the manifold indifferently if things do exist at the same time. For if they existed in time one after the other, in the order that, right, in the A through E example, then it would be impossible to begin with the apprehension of the perception of E and proceed backward to A, since A would belong to past time and thus no longer can be an object of apprehension. There's a footnote, 77. Well, there's two footnotes. There's E and 77, so I'm curious. Let's see what they say. In the copy of the first edition, Kant struck out the preceding paragraph and inserted the following note. Oh, he struck out this paragraph that was confusing the hell out of us. Okay, that's interesting. This is why footnotes are interesting, or one of the reasons for be interesting. Let's zoom in on this. Insert the following note. Space makes community possible. Now, since the thinking being, with all its faculties, whose effects belong merely to inner sense, is not a relation of space, the commercium of the soul, I don't know what commercium is, with the body is therefore not comprehensible. The community of things themselves must either have a third substance in which they do exist as accidents, I'm guessing that means, are in relation to one another. Spinozism. Or, since this won't do, it remains incomprehensible. Space is itself the phenomenon of possible community. If I consider bodies merely as phenomena that are in me, the cognitive faculty of inner sense may well stand in community with those of outer sense. Okay, so I want to break this down because this is space makes community possible. This makes sense, right? If space is infinite, that we could have a finite chunk of space, two finite chunks of space in which both things exist at the same time. Now, since the thinking being with all its faculties, whose effects belong merely to inner sense, right? Inner sense being time. I want to emphasize that can be confusing. Something Pat alerted me to earlier in the study, that inner sense is time. That was explained in the Transcendental Aesthetic, back towards more toward the beginning of the very beginning of the, maybe not the very beginning, but towards the more beginning section of the critique. So time, right? Since the thinking being with all its faculties, whose effects belong to the inner sense, is not a relation, right, of space. Space and time are both not relations, right? They're both pure intuitions. He explained this in the aesthetic as well, against more like Leibnizian views of space, for example. The commercium of the soul with the body is therefore not comprehensible. I don't understand what this means because I don't know what commercium means. Let me see if I can look that up. I am on a computer after all. Commercium definition. Commercial transaction. It's also a traditional academic feast.
Is it a commercial transaction?
That's one meaning. Another meaning is a traditional academic feast. In German, it is called a Commerce.
I don't see how that would be relevant here.
I don't know either. It's either a transaction or a feast, it seems. Okay, I don't know what that means. The community of things themselves must either have a third substance in which they exist as accidents and are in relation to one another. Spinozism.
Mm-hmm.
I guess this is Spinozism because that would be Spinozism because in Spinoza, space and time would be merely just relations of substance. Or since this won't do, it remains, right? Because we just can't be
Didn't he
Spinoza.
believe that?
What's that?
Don't Spinozas believe that the universe is infinite?
Yeah, I think so, but I don't know what that has to do with this.
Well, I'm just kind of confused. If Spinoza's belief is like,
We're
so
talking
if you're
about
saying that,
substance.
yeah, but I'm saying if Spinoza's view is that space, you're saying Spinoza's view is space is a relation between substance, correct?
It's not a it's like I don't know if it would be like a mode or an attribute, but it wouldn't be like he's saying the community of things in themselves must either have a the community of things in themselves, right? They all have like a third. They all have a deeper substance than just like space and time, right? Because
Okay, so he's not saying it's a relation, because I was just a bit confused with.
well, they're in relation to one another in the sense of being like accidents of substance in Kant's language. Like they're related to one another in being things in them in being accidents of substance. And in that sense, they are like relational to substance, like because they only exist in relation to substance, into the third substance, which I think is just it's what Spinoza would call substance, like God, nature, in relation to that. Like they exist only and purely in relation to that because they're effects, they're accidents of. That's how thing. So that's how Spinoza's metaphysics works, to my understanding. There is substance, and the different things in experience are just like substance expressed in like limited ways. So like you can everything is relational, essentially, in Spinozism, in the sense that they're all related to substance. You can explain everything in the universe because they're related to substance, presumably through causality, as I understand, because of the
Yeah, I understand, but the reason I brought up the point about the universe being infinite is like I don't understand how that would work with if you're
Well, what do you
saying,
mean by the universe?
well, being,
Being?
yeah,
You mean like just like substance? The Spinoza defines it like God, nature.
well, to my understanding, Spinoza views being as God,
Okay, yeah, it is, and
but I'm
that's
saying
why
if
space
that
and time and everything else in the community of things themselves would have a third substance. It wouldn't just be space and time.
I said, but that's what I'm saying. That I I don't understand how if he's saying that substance, um, basically God is substance, or being is substance and being is God, because God is for Spinoza the conceptualization of substance. Then that he uses, and space and time are merely relations of substance or God, or space and time don't necessarily exist as like intuitions, or they are just manifestations of substance. And that would have to him to say that like the universe is infinite, if that makes sense.
That doesn't really make sense to me how you just explained it.
Okay, yeah, maybe I'm just misunderstanding something.
Okay, so do you understand what I was saying before
Or what about what point?
about how the community of things in themselves, right, must either have a third substance in which they exist as accidents and are in relation to one another. Um, they're accidents of substance, and so they are related to one another as different accidents of substance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. That's how it's Spinozist. It doesn't really have to do with infinity. It has to do with like, I guess, sort of like how things are limited. They're they're just limitations of the infinite substance, and so
Yeah,
they're related in that way. They're of the same thing, but they are just limited differently. So you
yeah,
could relate them to each other based on the fact that they're um, of the same thing. Kant is not saying that. Kant is saying just this won't do. It remains a comprehensive, because Kant doesn't believe in Spinoza's like substance monism. Right? He's a transcendental idealist. He thinks that um, there are transcendental conditions by which we receive appearance, like we experience and work with appearances. He's a dualist. We don't actually get access to the thing in itself. That's the operation he's been, or that's the assumption by which he's been on which he's been operating through the whole critique very consistently. Well, yeah, I think consistently, but he was talking differently up here. It seemed to me. Thus the um this therefore also the conditioned possibility of things themselves objects of experience. So that was a little confusing to me. But he struck out that paragraph and wrote this instead in the copy of the first edition. So, I mean, that makes a lot more sense to me. He's saying that we're not Spinozists. We don't have things in themselves. Space itself is the phenomenon of possible community, which I really like that definition, because Pat and I way earlier in the study, back when we were in the on space section in the critique, we were like, how the hell can Kant, imagine space without any qualities? Well, if you define it like this, I think it makes a lot more sense. Space is the phenomenon of possible community. My professor, James Dodd at the New School, actually explained this concept really well to me a week or two ago. Because I asked him how can Kant talk about space without any like qualities and as just a pure intuition, like really what does that mean in terms of like outer sense? And he was saying something a lot like what Kant is saying here. It's the phenomenon of possibility of community. He made a really good like empirical analogy. He said, imagine you are, on the edge of some like just like platform in space, right? Like just in the world, and like you're looking down at it, and then like it just stops. He said that like if you were to like look up or at a different area of space, you your instinct is to anticipate that there at least like that there will be something there. Because it's possible that things will be. It's impossible that like there couldn't possibly be something else there because space is infinite, and that really like nailed down what this means for me. Space itself is the phenomenon of possible community. Something else can always exist at the same time as something else. So if I consider bodies merely as phenomena that are in me, the cognitive faculty of the inner sense may stand well in the community with those of outer sense. So time, right, the cognitive faculty of inner sense, may well stand in community with those of outer sense. So I think this is just saying that things can exist in space at the same time because space is the phenomenon of possible community. And we are able to cognize that because of the concept that he explained earlier. That's my understanding. Kirk, do you have anything on this?
No, I mean, the way you explained it seems to make sense. It's a little bit. I mean, for somebody who's not as familiar with like Spinoza and Leibniz and like rationalist understandings of like substance, it's a little bit hard for me to like fully understand. But yeah,
Cool. All right, yeah. I mean, I don't want to get too much into Spinoza because this is the comprehensive yet informal study of Kant's critique of pure reason. But yeah, this just goes to show that it is definitely a good idea to try to familiarize yourself with, Kant's predecessors before jumping into the critique of pure reason. I'm also interested in checking out the prolegomena, I think is how you pronounce it, of any future metaphysics. I think it breaks down a lot of like concepts. Like to my understanding, I haven't read it, but I'm interested in reading it because I've heard it seems to have a reputation, to my understanding, of being able to break down these metaphysical principles and concepts a lot easier. Okay, so I'm going to move on. Now, if you assume that in a manifold of substances as appearances, each of them would be completely isolated, i.e., none would affect any other, nor receive a reciprocal influence from it, then I say that their simultaneity would not be the object of a possible perception, and that the existence of the one could not lead to the existence of the other by any path of empirical syntheses. For if you thought that they were separated by a completely empty space, then the perception that proceeds from one to the other in time would certainly determine the existence of the latter by means of a succeeding perception, but would not be able to distinguish whether that appearance objectively follows the former or is rather simultaneous with it. Okay, I have to read this one again, but it seems to be talking about how do you know if something that you perceived before okay, so you perceive like two like substances, I guess he's calling them, right? How do you know if substance B, like let's just say this one you perceive secondly in the succession of time, how do you know that substance A exists simultaneously, and so you can like reciprocally perceive it, or if it like just no longer exists and your only B exists now? How do you tell that? That seems to be the question here. So how does he answer that? If you assume that in a manifold of substances appearances, each of them would not be completely isolated, none would affect any, or right, for if you thought they were separated by completely empty space in perception. Oh, he's just saying that if we didn't have, he's just saying that if you think, sorry, I'm trying to like find a way to put this. I think it makes sense to me. If you assume that in a manifold of substances appearances, each of them would be completely isolated, none. Yeah, I think he's just saying like if you don't believe him about like reciprocal relations, simultaneity would not be possible. You would have no idea, no way of being able to like comprehend the notion that two things exist at the same time without um but is he saying that about the cat, like the logical, is he saying that about the concept, or does he, in a manifold of substances as appearance, each of them would be completely isolated, none of them would affect any other nor receive a reciprocal influence from it? I can't tell if he means like, if I can't tell if he's talking about space. I'm going to assume he's talking about like the concept, because of the section we're in the book. We're no longer on the aesthetics, so I don't think he'd be really talking about like the manifold or like space itself. But okay, what I think he's saying here is that if you don't have the concept of reciprocal influence, then the experience of simultaneity is not possible. You cannot empirically experience simultaneity if you don't have the notion of reciprocal influence, which makes sense. In my mind right now, an example is coming up of like babies with like object permanence. Um, right? If a baby like, oh, actually, I don't know if this is how it works. I'm not like a psychologist of child development or child cognition, but or whatever the hell the field that object permanence comes from. But let's just say like I'm a baby and I don't have this notion, this concept of reciprocal influence. In my experience, I would like look at, like let's just say I'm looking at the Critique of Pure Reason, right, in my like little baby hands, and then I like look up at the sky. If I don't have the concept of reciprocal influence, I have no way to tell that the Critique of Pure Reason still exists while I'm looking at the sun, or vice versa. I seem to only have the thing that's in front of me, which goes back to what he was saying earlier about the imagination only presenting one perception at a time to the subject. So that makes sense. Do you have any questions about that, Kirk?
No.
All right. Let's see. We have about 2 paragraphs. No, 3 paragraphs. Okay. Do you? We can probably just go back and forth, Kirk, if you want with reading.
I can read next if you like. Or
Yeah. Go ahead.
in addition to the mere existence, there must therefore be something through which A determines the position of B in time, and conversely also something by which B does the same for A. It's only under this condition can those substances be empirically represented as existing simultaneously. Now, only that determines the position of another in time, which is the cause of it or its determinations. Thus, each substance, since it can be a consequence only with regard to its determinations, must simultaneously contain the causality of certain determinations in the other and the effects of the causality of the other, i.e., they must stand in dynamical community immediately or mediately if their simultaneity is to be cognized in any possible experience. But now everything in regard to objects of experience is necessary, without which the experience of these objects itself would be impossible. Thus, it is necessary for all substances and appearance, so insofar as they are simultaneous, to stand in thoroughgoing community of interaction with each other. The word
Aha.
community.
Sorry, I just wanted to break down this paragraph. This is really interesting because Kant's basically, I think Kant is making the argument. I'm seeing now why this section is right before the refutation of idealism. I think, sorry, I'm having a lot of like ideas sparking in my head, but I'm just plugging in my computer so I don't lose this recording and start over because I'd probably be very upset if that happened. Okay, computer's plugged in. So, so he's saying that he's saying things just can't exist at the same time, at least at the beginning, right? Like things just can't exist. They have to. This is what Kant was saying before about influencing and like the ground. They have to interact. Otherwise, it seems that you just have things existing and not really like how would A and B be reciprocal if they aren't themselves somehow like grounding each other in existence. So let's see what he says. Now, only that determines the position of another in time, which is causality or its determinations. Thus, each substance, since it can be a consequence only with regard to its determinations, simultaneously contain the causality of certain determinations in the other and the effects of the causality in the other, i.e., they must stand in dynamical community, immediately or mediately, if their simultaneity is to be cognized in any possible experience. But now everything in regard to these objects of experience is necessary, without which the experience of these objects themselves would be impossible. But now everything in regard to objects of experience. Aha. Thus it is necessary for all substances in appearance, insofar as they are simultaneous, to stand in thoroughgoing community of interaction with each other. So he's basically saying that things have to constantly be affecting each other through causality, hence why he calls it dynamical community. Right? Things are dynamically causing and affecting each other in experience. That's the only way they can exist. Otherwise, they wouldn't exist simultaneously, because existence involves grounding. I guess was the point of bringing up that like Spinoza stuff before. So anyway, yeah. So the reason I brought up Berkeley and the refutation of idealism, I'm sure we'll see this when we actually get there. But right, because just quick. Actually, it'd be very helpful if Pat were here because he explains Berkeley better than anyone else I've seen. Or I mean, that's an insult maybe to my professors, but at least in recent memory, he's explained Berkeley the best. I can try to explain it. Berkeley basically thinks, to my understanding, that the reason things exist. So Berkeley, right, has this principle: to be is to be perceived. So Berkeley runs into the problem, right? How do things exist when you're not looking at them? And to my understanding, he answers this: well, there's God, who is perceiving everything all at once. Like, he's basically like our perception, except, extended. Like a gajillion, infinitely, basically. So we can see infinitely and thus, experience things can exist without you looking at them because they're being perceived by God. This is Kant's account now of how things exist empirically simultaneously. It's not that somebody is perceiving them. It is that the objects themselves are causing each other as a result of the understanding something. I think it would be the understanding, whatever faculty, which to be honest I can't remember right now, between like imagination, the understanding. There's like another one that I'm just brain farting on. Whichever faculty it belongs, it's not sensibility. I know that. Whatever like spontaneous, productive, active faculty, which makes me just inclined to say the understanding, is in charge of these principles, is adding into the experience here. That is what it allows things to exist simultaneously. The causality between them allows for this notion of reciprocity, or it allows things to exist simultaneously, rather, which then we can add reciprocity, it seems. Not exactly sure, but there's something about the understanding which applies to the objects of experience existence simultaneously, and it seems to be cause and effect. They're causing each other, right? Causal determinations in the other affects the causality. Other, they must stand in dynamical community if they are simultaneously is to be cognized in any experience. So it seems that well, I'll finish because I'm interested about the relationship now between the causality and reciprocity. Maybe that's what the difference he was trying to draw earlier. I don't know. Well, let's finish and see if I can put this together. The word community is ambiguous in our language and can either mean communo or commercio. God, what does that mean? Community or commerce. The former connotating membership in the whole, but not necessarily interacting among the parts. The latter connotating interaction. I see. So commercium is interaction, and I'm guessing just from the context we had earlier through causality, the grounding. So communo or communio is when they're not interact, based on this footnote I'm reading here, when substances just are existing in the whole but not necessarily interacting. And commercium is when the substances are interacting in the community. So communio, interaction in the community without mutual interaction, commercium in the community with mutual interaction, and that's between substances. So, okay, let's see. The word community is ambiguous in our language. It can mean either communio or commercium. We use it here in the latter sense as a dynamic community, right? Kant just said that things can't exist at the same time without interacting. So this idea of communio metaphysically right now just wouldn't make sense. We use it here in the latter sense, dynamic community without, which even the local community, communio spatiae, community of spaces. That is a single spatial order relationship among multiple objects. Okay. That could never be empirically cognized. For our experiences, it is easy to notice that only continuous influence in all places in space can lead our sense from one object to another, that the light that plays between our eyes and the heavenly bodies affects immediate community between us and the latter, and thereby proves the simultaneity of the latter. But we cannot empirically alter any place, perceive this alteration, without matter everywhere making the perception of our position possible. And only by means of its reciprocal influence can it establish their simultaneity, and thereby the coexistence of the most distant objects, though only immediately. Without community, every perception of appearance in space is broken off from the others, and the chain of empirical representation, i.e. experience, would have to start entirely over with every new object, without the previous one being in the least bit connected or being able to stand in a temporal relation with it. I do not in the least hereby mean to refute empty space, that may well exist where perceptions do not reach, and thus where no empirical cognition of simultaneity takes place. But it is then hardly an object for our experience at all. Okay, this is a really interesting paragraph to me. Kant here is making an analogy to experience, which I was really struggling to do. I was talking about like the candle and the candle maker as a more sort of like direct creation, but he's sort of just talking about the possibility of things existing at the same time reciprocally. So the example I was coming up with a while ago now with the candle maker wouldn't really work, right? Because until the candle's actually made, but that's really what I was getting at. I was talking about the creation of the candle. So like one thing, right? The candle maker causing the creation of the candle, one substance causing the other. But he's talking about mutual existence. So mutually things existing, which has to be commercium, right? Because of what he explained in the previous paragraph. Causality, it wouldn't be able to exist at the same time without affecting each other. And so he brings in the example of light, right? For light and matter, all sort of like leading us to look at different things differently, right? The fact that light mediates us and is moving, right, and in an active dynamic relationship with the heavenly bodies, that that is what he's talking about. The light and the heavenly bodies existing at the same time. Even though we can't perceive the alterations that they're making, that's what makes the perception of them possible. And only by means of its reciprocal influence can it establish their simultaneity and thereby coexistence of the most distant objects, though only immediately. So without the interaction between the light and the actual heavenly bodies, we wouldn't be able to see them. Similarly, without the interaction of substances metaphysically, we wouldn't be able to cognize them. And then he interestingly is like, I'm not saying this doesn't mean empty space doesn't exist, guys. I'm just saying that it doesn't exist where we perceive things, because perception involves a community of substances interacting with each other. Okay. Does that all make sense to you, Kurt? Do you have any questions about that?
That makes sense.
Cool. In that case, do you want to read the last paragraph here?
Sure. Let's see. The following can serve as an elucidation in our mind. All appearances as contained in a possible experience must stand in a community of a perception, and insofar as the objects are to be represented as being connected by existing simultaneously, they must reciprocally determine their position in one time and thereby constitute a whole. If this subjective community is to rest on an objective ground, or is to be related to appearances of substances, then perception of one as ground must make possible the perception of the other, inversely, so that the succession that always exists in perceptions as apprehensions will not be ascribed to the objects. But these can instead be represented as existing simultaneously. But this is a reciprocal influence, i.e., a real community of substances, without which the empirical relation of simultaneity would not obtain experience. Through this commerce, the appearances insofar as they stand outside one another and yet in connection constitute a composite, and composites of this sort are possible in many ways. Hence, the three dynamic relations from which all others arise are those of inherence, of course, and composition.
Cool. So he basically just summed up everything that I was just saying or trying to say. Let me know if you have any questions about this, because I don't think I can like really break this down any more than I already have.
I mean, so far it seems pretty similar to what we've already been going through.
Yeah, although it's a helpful elucidation, I think, or summary, I would say. There is more, but we've been at this for a little while now. Yeah, we're at an hour 10, so I think I'm going to call it. Next time we'll pick up on the 3 dots. The summary, basically, I'll call it, of the analogies of experience. Cool, and then we'll get on to, after that, the postulates of empirical thinking in general. We'll have an elucidation of that, and then I think we get to the refutation of idealism. Yeah, after some more. Which, to be honest, already kind of happened, at least in the sense of Berkeley. But he goes after Descartes. So that'll be interesting. So a lot more coming, exciting stuff, it seems. Thank you for joining us this time. Yeah, Kantian wisdom of the day. Don't forget to cognize your perceptions as a commercium as opposed to a communio. Otherwise, you will just not fucking perceive anything because the causality is necessary. Because they have to ground each other. Which, honestly, I was looking for like a proof, but that just kind of like makes sense. Because if you're able to look at one thing and then the other in the same way, except inverse, it seems that there have to be mutual conditions between them. And because this is all about the conditions of possibility, you would have to have a grounding for both of them. So it being the relation between them being causality makes sense. I'm still a little confused, I think, as to the concept of reciprocity versus the communal causality, the commercium. But maybe they're the same thing, and I don't know, constantly using different words. It's hard to tell, but I think I overall understand it. I'm just a little confused the exact like which concepts are being used how, because we've been over causality before, but he seemed to be introducing something new with the concept of reciprocity. Unless it's just the concept of reciprocity results as the causal relation between appearances. So that could be it too. I don't know. Let me know if you have any thoughts about that in the comments. Let's hope for Pat to return sooner rather than later. Hope Pat's okay. Yeah, don't forget to cognize your perceptions in commercium as opposed to communio. That's my Kantian wisdom of the day. Smoke weed every day.
Smoke weed every day.
You have anything to exit with, Kirk?
Nothing about this. I mean, unless you have like 1 or 2 minutes to talk afterwards.
Maybe for a bit. All right, well, that's this edition of the Comprehensive Yet Informal State of Kant's Critique of Pure Reason. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.